Good evening, everyone. This is Just Vine
and Kanzuki Dynasty
with 2MK. So today we are going to take a look at DOA, Dead or Alive. It's a fighting game we don't normally stream, so today's a little special. So basically what we're going to be talking about today is getting into fighting games. Now, DOA Last Round, which is the game we're playing, is free. Now, not all of the characters are unlocked, but there's 4 characters that are always unlocked and 2 that rotate, so you get a pretty decent look into the game itself, and the characters are fairly varied, so you get that sort of old school arcade feeling of slightly less options and the ability to pay into more after you poke at things. Now, it's a 3D fighting game, but the way Dead or Alive games are normally built means that a lot of the same stuff you learn in 2D applies to 3D. A lot of the Jonkin or mix-up situations have very similar principles.
You can obviously still get punished and such,
with a few additional variables to things, but it's largely the same game in terms of mindset and how you approach things. This is partially done because a lot of DOA characters are based on a lot of martial arts research. The core fighters are all ninjas, so not so much for them, but they still... Dead or Alive games have principles to the way moves come out according to style. So it's very intuitive to find moves. For example, Kanzuki Dynasty here hasn't played Ayane barely at all, and DOA not so much. I am quite a bit more experienced with the game. But like a lot of fighting games, as long as they have good buttons and the game is fairly balanced, this is more about giant mecha bodhisattvas in the background. It's more about
myself back turned again. So anyway, as she mentioned, I am relatively new to this game. I have played it some, I have not played Ayane much, and overall I'm still definitely what you call a beginner. But as you all know, I have experience with other fighting games. I actually first touched DOA when I was relatively new to fighting games overall, back when I was just starting to get into Street Fighter IV as well. I got a little bit of experience with DOA at the time. And it's actually was not that bad for learning fighting games generally. It's obviously somewhat different than Street Fighter and such, and has some sort of different skills and factors of the game, but overall things are relatively similar. And it also provides a decent introduction to fighting games if you, in terms of how you can approach it. And so, actually it's sort of a similar experience. When I was first getting into fighting games, and when I'm trying to, like, get a handle on DOA again, since I occasionally poke at it, I haven't played it a lot yet or gotten seriously used to it. The experience you have as a new player getting into fighting games in the first place, or as a...
Very nice.
As an experience... Well, what can I say? I'm just perfect, apparently. As a... Oh my. As a beginner is fundamentally sort of similar. You're thinking about the same sorts of things, and have the same sorts of problems, just now that I've been through Street Fighter for a while, and I'm somewhat more of a veteran at fighting games generally, I'm a little more confident at how to go about getting used to something, or feeling like I know how to get going in a fighting game. So I can confront those challenges a little more easily.
So as I was saying earlier, it's fairly easy to get into this game because a lot of stuff applies across basically all fighting games. And since DOA is based on a lot more intuitive, fluid movement, it's easier to find your buttons in to the situation that you want to put them in. So you don't have to do too much fumbling before you figure out, oh, she's coming at me with this sort of weird twirly thing. Okay, well, what do you do against that? Can I block that, or do I need to interrupt it? How do I interact with that situation?
Right. Since I've never played Ayane before, other than, like, I don't know, like, at 20 minutes, like, 2 years ago, I'm sort of in the same sort of position that you are starting out with anything. I'm both a little bit unfamiliar with the game. Ouch. And I don't really know what my character is doing. So, it's, I guess, sort of something you would experience, regardless if you were new to a fighting game or just new to this fighting game. And you sort of just have to poke at it along and try things out, figure out what you want to do in what situations. And what helps with this is a little bit of having the right mindset from either previous fighting games or from watching streams, talking to an experienced player.
Or martial arts, really. I mean,
that too. In terms of how to just basically how to try things out and get used to them. Like, I found out just recently that quarter circle forward is this lovely sort of dive kick. I found out just now that its range is slightly shorter than that. Found out a few minutes, about a half a round ago, that its startup is longer than some of her quicker stuff. Not too surprising. But overall, the same sorts of things you have to learn, either as someone brand new picking up Ayane, or someone who's coming from Street Fighter, or, I don't know, Guilty Gear, or some other fighting game. Everyone really faces the same challenges.
But, I mean, veterans of fighting games, pros, all that sort of people who have a lot more experience, they're basically feeling very similar things to you. The only real difference between a person who is a pro at fighting games and someone just getting into fighting games when it comes to a new fighting game is confidence. Mm-hmm. They feel that they have a lot of experience that is similar to this, so they feel justified in testing things and believing that certain ways of approaching a situation are correct until they are proven otherwise. All that sort of stuff has a big impact not just on the way they play, but the way they learn the game. Right, and basically the same sorts of things that you would be picking up in DOA or on your first pass through are going to be basically the sorts of things that apply to any fighting game. No matter where you go, you're always going to have the same sort of general path for learning. You're going to have the same sort of experience, I guess, and DOA is actually an interestingly good way to get into things because in a lot of fighting games, if you're brand new, you may have tried something at a friend's house or something and realized that this execution is kind of hard. There's this quarter circle thing, and then what's this dragon punch or whatever. And while DOA does have that, for instance, well then, this is that dive kick is a quarter circle move. A lot of stuff in DOA, and certainly plenty enough to start out with, is just direction plus button. So you can start to get into it and start to have fun even before you've mastered that sort of execution, as long as you can hold the direction and press either punch or kick, or maybe throw, depending on how you end up getting further into the game. And that's very useful because it amplifies, it enables a particular effect and makes it very simple in that one thing that's important to realize about fighting games, and may not be immediately obvious if you're new or if you've seen other people and feel like there's a lot of stuff going on here, is that you don't really have to be an expert or strictly better than your opponent to, like, have fun in a fighting game or just even technically be able to win. Because in addition to the fact that if you have a friend who's like way better than you, they can play a new character or they can practice particular things or hold back in certain ways,
all you really have to do to win in a fighting game is not necessarily know all the moves, but be able to have your just make your opponent think that they know how to beat you, and then make them wrong. Basically, trickery, and that rock, paper, scissors that's on the basis of all sorts of fighting games. Or fighting games as a concept.
So as you can see, I am definitely holding back a little bit against Kanzuki Dynasty. But that doesn't necessarily mean I'm letting her win. I'm more so just not using as many of the different layers of combat to essentially press an advantage in a realm she doesn't understand yet, because she's new to DOA, so she doesn't know all of the mechanics and all of the weird tricks that you can do.
Indeed. And if you happen to be new to a game, or you're playing with someone who's also new to a game and you're both getting into it together, you really can have fun very much from the beginning.
A lot of this game involves convincing your opponent what should happen. This is similar to a lot of fighting games, and that's why it's a good way to learn them. But it's the most important part. Because unlike in Street Fighter, or to some extent Dragon Ball FighterZ, DOA has a very good way of making sure that if your opponent has an idea of how to defeat you, and you change the situation somehow. For example, Kanzuki Dynasty started throwing out holds, which is a sort of parry technique for those of you unfamiliar with the system. Basically, if you attack, you grab the hit, and it does a counterattack, like that. She's been throwing those out very occasionally. So the first stage of Just Vine, me, versus Kanzuki Dynasty, the Ayane over here, was, okay, she wants to press a lot of buttons, so I'll press buttons that beat her buttons, and that'll be fine. But once she made that small change of putting in the hold, she started doing much better. Not just because she started doing damage from the holds, but also because now I have to think more.
She can't do that long charge move because I'm almost certainly going to grab it.
Now, she didn't know...
Oh, not that time.
She didn't know that I could use super to bypass that, but still.
Well, I didn't even press it that time.
In Street Fighter, a similar equivalent would be a character using a Dragon Punch to on Wake Up to get the opponent thinking. But for one thing, Dragon Punch is a little harder to do than holding back in a button at the right time. And don't get me wrong, holds are extremely technical once you get further into the layers of Dead or Alive. It's not easy at all, but for a beginner, it's something you can mash at the very first stages of the game. And it's a universal mechanic. And it's very obvious too. A Dragon Punch is sort of like, what just happened? I did this weird thing. How do I repeat that? With a hold, you can always repeat hold fairly easily if you have no execution. Because it's just back in a button. Or forward in a button, depending on your character for certain attacks. But in general, everyone has a way to hold. And they have a way to hold basically every attack except for rare exceptions. So you and your friend can mash buttons, essentially, and occasionally stick out one of those throws, or one of those holds, sorry. And then suddenly, you'll have that moment of, oh, I can make you scared. I can just never throw that again and make you think that the whole way to beat me includes tricking me into doing hold and punishing it through like throw or a delayed attack, which in itself is also a fairly easy low execution thing to do.
And fundamentally, you just end up building layer on layer, and you end up finding different ways to violate your opponent's expectations, to trick them, and overall, as your knowledge with the game goes, as you find one or two more things, you start to get familiar with your character and a little bit familiar with the basic concept of fighting games, which is more or less technically outsmarting your opponent.
So as you can see on that screen there, not every character is available, as I said at the beginning, but a core team that is DOA 5 last round core fighters, that's what this is called. You get 6 characters, so throughout the stream, we'll be showing you some of them. I was using Hitomi at first, since that's my main character that I use in the game, and just wanted to be able to autopilot a little bit so Kanzuki Dynasty could get used to things.
Alright.
And so we could talk while we stream.
Indeed. And now, while I have certainly seen Lillian playing Kasumi, I have never played her myself either. So we're actually just sort of showing off some of those core fighters that are free. There are 4 characters in the game that are always free, and then 2 more that change around every week. So you always get a chance to slowly try out more characters and pick up more stuff, and figure out if there's someone you want to buy or really like and get into. So it's a nice introduction in that way as well. You have access to several general fighting styles and the ability to slowly get used to the rest of the game. Or the rest of the options.
For free.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean,
because while it's great to have a game like DBFC or Street Fighter V or Guilty Gear, those games can be dropping $60 on something when you're not sure what sort of fighting game you want, or even if you necessarily want to stick with fighting games, you just sort of want to try it out and get started learning for the very first time.
So, back a little bit to new players that are just starting out in a fighting game. Very nice. Again, the feeling is different. Only in the confidence. Basically, every player that comes across a new fighting game will be doing button checks, randomly testing things in different situations.
Not to mention just figuring out their character's game plan, how they interact with other people. I want to know how I pulled that off so I can do it again.
I have no idea how I did that, by the way.
Alright.
Because everybody's super is a little different, but the execution-wise, I think it's just like... It's normally like 2 directional buttons and then your heavy punch or heavy kick.
But yes, if you have a friend to play with or something, it can be very simple to get started. And DUI makes this even simpler with its lower execution for certainly a large number of a character's basic moves. Which is actually relatively intuitive as well, in various cases.
So, a pro will be checking out their buttons, having a good time just being like, oh, I didn't expect you could do that, or oh, this was low instead of high, that's interesting. Or what the hell just happened to me because I have no idea what that input even was.
Not to mention, what did I just do?
But eventually, especially if you have like a friend to play with, or access to online play, you can gradually start adding layers to whatever the fighting game's mechanics are. But mostly just starting with basic footsies and basic mix-up Jonkin style stuff. But like I was saying a little bit ago, it's all about, at least at the very first like month or so in practice, and even honestly later on, because it's a universal foundational lesson. If I convince my opponent that they can beat me this way, and then I change how they're supposed to beat me, then suddenly the game becomes very different. And your opponent is stuck trying to figure out how to adapt, what the right answer is. They don't necessarily know what your plan is, but changing your game plan can be very simple, as we discussed with throwing in holds, or just occasionally throwing in a throw out during a block string.
You thought it was rock, but it was I, Scissors.
That sort of thing. This is different from how you fight a computer for a lot of reasons. But a lot of people's first experience with fighting games will be with a computer. So it's important for players to understand the difference. So the way you approach fighting a computer is basically about as simple as how you first approach fighting a player. You are, because the CPU will almost always invariably be able to read your inputs and have a very decided way of playing, whether it's random or programmed with patterns. It really depends on the AI of the game, but it still boils down to needing to do optimal things, needing to do optimal damage, and needing to guess or do things that can't be beaten. Figuring out the tick in the CPU and exploiting it more or less. Now, as fighting game AI got better, this is a little more interesting and challenging and all that fun stuff, but you're not setting up a situation where the CPU thinks they know how to beat you.
Because the CPU is not quite thinking in the same way that your opponent player might be.
Right. It's random to a degree, and it's also reading your inputs. So
they can adapt, but it's not quite going to be the same sort of mind games as easily necessarily.
Right.
Which can be good for figuring out, well, I have this character that can do these things, and what do I have that beats what this character is doing? And figuring out, buttons that defeat things, or sorting out what's going to stop some option that the CPU is using, which is a little bit of a different thing than trying to figure out, okay, well, this player that I'm sitting next to wants to work on it wants to do a certain thing, or thinks I'm going to do something, and so I'm going to do the opposite of that. It helps for learning, but it's just a different sort of thing.
Down you go.
Ouch.
And this is basically true across all fighting games. No matter how good the AI is, unless they have a really in-depth system for adapting to the player's style and not being able to adjust to it right away due to seeing the inputs and stuff, it's almost always going to be the case. Now, DOA, unlike some free fighting games, has a very robust online system, and honestly, plenty of people still play DOA online. It may take a little while to find a lounge or a random match, but you'll basically get one fairly quickly, especially depending on area.
Mm-hmm. And if you find someone that's about your level, or who's recognizes what level you're at and is willing to play with you generally, or even sometimes against computer, depending on how it's going or what you're learning, you really can just have fun in a fighting game without having to already start knowing lots of things. Because, for instance, I've never played Kasumi before. I played Ayane barely, and I could still manage to have some fun with just fine here. Doing this without a whole lot of experience to fall back on.
So we'll start talking a little bit briefly about the different characters, although it's not really the intention of this stream to give in-depth stuff. We're going to only briefly go over the basic types of characters there are. So Hayate and Kasumi cosmetically have a lot of very similar stuff, and this is because in DOA there is basically a ninja clan that has ninja martial arts, more or less. So they have very similar schools of thought, and like I said, although a lot of the game is based on very well researched martial arts stuff, they made a little bit of stuff up. But it's still based on a very intuitive, fluid sort of dynamic. So the main difference between Hayate and Kasumi, as you may have noticed from, honestly, just their appearance and the way they hit things. Kasumi is very much a footsies, evasive sort of character. While Hayate is more about mix-ups and power. He still has ways to evade, like all ninja users. And he has a few tricky teleportation things, like Kasumi. But his teleportation stuff is more about setting up positions rather than evading and tricking the opponent. If you want to play a tricky character, Kasumi is your girl. If you like footsies and playing the neutral, Kasumi is also a very good character for this. She has a lot of moves that have weird hitboxes, and it can take a little bit of testing for new players to figure out if she's hitting mid or low. And this just has a psychological advantage. It makes throwing her a little more risky, unless you have extensive knowledge. And it also means that she has more ways to make you hesitate.
Poor bot.
But she also has very quick, long buttons, which is very important for any footsie character. Unlike Hayate here, who you see has basically a lot of similar but very slow motions. But he is a very foundational mix-up character. I can go from that backflip that I've been showing you a little bit into different things. I can hold it. I can go into a sliding punch. I can go into a low kick. Like a lot of characters in DOA, he and Kasumi have stances that change the property of what happens when you push a button. So you'll need to be careful, especially with these two, into looking at what their animations are and learning the different flows you can get out of the characters. So we'll move on to two other characters next. So we have Ayane and Ryu here. So, Ryu, also known as Hayabusa,
No relation to Street Fighter's Ryu.
even though they also are the equivalent of Shotos, but you know. Anyway, as you can see, like Kasumi, he has very nice, long buttons. But unlike Kasumi, he's a little less evasive. And a lot more straightforward in the way he gets damage. Similarly, Ayane is a bit similar to Kasumi as well, although she is much less footsies oriented and more so rushdown. But like Ryu, she is very directional. The two of them have very straightforward ways of fighting, and once you get used to their flows, it can start being very apparent as to what game plans you need to adapt to. Now, they have very strong game plans, and therefore they are extremely viable characters. But their learning curve for fighting against them as a result is slightly lower, and honestly, and DOA has a very large amount of matchup knowledge you can learn because of, as you can see, all of these different stages have basically changed the way matchups work. So they introduce a whole different way of thinking about a battle, but I really would not worry about stage matchup knowledge. It's a bit more advanced than we should be getting into here, but it is another layer, and it helps you get used to things like Tekken and Soul Calibur, where that's a very familiar layer of changing the game a little bit.
But anyway, it's also important to realize that while there are all of these layers of complexity, as we were saying the whole time, and fundamentally still are, You can fight on this stage and, like, arrange to put your opponent into the danger zones, figure out how to get them on the wall and all of that. Or you can just fight and, even on this stage with lots of danger zones, not worry too much about that as a beginner. Just work on adding the layers as you go.
Yeah, and
Which really helps, because it's not like when I'm coming into this game, I'm going to know, I certainly don't, even what all the danger zones are. Apparently I can't throw you through that fence, for instance. I have no idea one way or another.
we have this on random, but there's a few good stages, such as the desert one you saw earlier, the beach stage, which I don't think we've seen yet. There's even a flat-out training stage, which is just a big empty plane. So there's plenty of stages that don't have as many variables.
And so you can both work your way up, and if you want an even playing field for sure, you can pick somewhere where it doesn't matter at all.
Right. And there's other stages too, which have very frequent, but more or less the same type of hazard. For example, there's a stage where it's just an eternally falling cliff. So there's very small platforms, places where you can get people against the wall, but there's always this constant risk of falling. So you can use that stage to get used to other stages where falling is an important factor in the way you're thinking about the match. So DOA is a very good way to getting used to that type of layer as well. Especially if you're thinking about, hey, I might want to pick up Tekken someday because that looks cool, but I'm still not sure about this whole fighting game thing. I don't want to spend money on it if I'm not going to have any fun. This is a very good training ground for that sort of thing.
Right. DOA has sort of like a little bit of everything, and you can get a start on basically anything with it, don't you think?
Exactly. But like I was saying, a lot of the stuff in here applies to 2D stuff just as well as 3D. So I think that covers Ayane and Ryu enough. Again, they're basically just straightforward characters who either are footsies or rushdown. Footsies for Hayabusa and rushdown for Ayane. So next we'll go over the next two fighters here, who are the current week's rotation. The rotation changes about every 2 weeks. Sometimes Team Ninja takes a little longer to update them, but 2 weeks is a fairly standard timing for it. So this week we got Rachel and Leon, which is a very good round cast. Sometimes it's not as well distributed, but Rachel is a powerhouse. She has very good ways to mix up her game with grappling, and has very powerful stances and buttons. Leon, similarly, is a very good character who has very slow buttons, but very strong buttons, as you can see. And unlike a lot of characters, Leon is capable of going into throw during his block strings a lot easier than most other characters. He doesn't have to wait as long. So these are two characters that have very good grapples and very good ways of keeping an opponent out through their larger, strong buttons. Leon, similarly, also, unlike most characters, has a very good hold system. He gets a lot more benefit in terms of damage out of his holds. And he generally benefits a lot more positionally from his holds. Rachel, on the other hand, more so benefits from her grapples in terms of positioning and damage. But again, she's not so much a grappler as she is a powerhouse. So for Leon, you want to play him for defensive mix-up sort of stuff, since he has good holds and ways to safely hit fairly heavy buttons due to the way he can position things. And Rachel is the sort of offensive powerhouse character, can also be played fairly defensively if you want, and has good positioning from her grapples. And that covers the currently available fighters. Kanzuki Dynasty and I are going to play some of our regular characters now. And I'm going to show off some awesome DLC, which you don't have to buy, but I'm a sucker for good costumes. But even though it's free, you still basically get all of the stages, which I think is a fairly nice addition. The stages are very well thought out, very well crafted. And the characters have a very good variation in their styles of play and buttons, while still having fairly universal stuff to basically all fighting games. This is the stage I was talking about earlier about Eternally Falling.
As requested. The beach and the eternal fall.
You can buy individual characters if you see someone in the like survival mode style thing that this game has. We'll go over like all of the different like features available to you in Core Fighters a little bit later on. For now, we're just gonna have a little bit of fun, since our whole point here is free game that is fun and can teach you how to have fun in fighting games and learn the very, very basics if you know the general mindsets of stuff. Ooh, very nice.
Or if you just want to learn the secrets of throwing your opponent off cliffs.
Hitomi involves a little more complexity than most other characters because, like a lot of the karate-based characters, which Hitomi definitely is based off of, her holds are different for holding against mid kicks and mid punches. It's forward for kicks and back for punches. And this results in a lot of different hold positionings and moves that come out. And they're really optimized for Hitomi's pressure after them. So it's a benefit, but it makes her a little more technical of a character, which is one of the reasons why she is not a core fighter. And I bought her because I've played previous iterations of Dead or Alive and knew that's who my main character is. But again, it's fairly cheap. I think it's like
$3 or $4 per character.
Yeah, it's not that expensive.
So, and if you want to buy everyone, it might add up, and you might want to actually buy the full version of the game rather than the
which does go on sale.
But overall, if you just play somebody during rotation, you'd be like, I like this character, I want to keep playing them. It's really not that bad.
It's as much as a costume, which is pretty dirt cheap.
Right.
But I do think they did a pretty decent job of picking who a core fighter was, and honestly, all of the ninja characters is a fairly good idea for a lot of reasons. Because you got two decent footsie characters, one evasive and offensive based, one defensive and power based, two very straightforward characters, one more footsie based and one more rushdown based, and of course Hayate gets to count as mix-ups as well as footsies depending how you play him. So it's a fairly round cast, and once you throw in two of basically any other character type, it sort of completes itself in terms of this is a type of character you'll see in this game that you can play or face, and there's characters with better stuff in terms of style that you may want to do. I will not let you push me off the cliff today, thank you. But basically, what happened right there, to reiterate something we were talking about earlier in the stream, was I started noticing that Kanzuki Dynasty was throwing out throws more.
Holds, actually.
Or holds. Sorry, I really do get the two confused because they do very similar things in some fighting games. But throws are very different from holds in this. Down I go. So I started blocking more, although not this round because I'm autopiloting a little bit. And I started mixing up high and low a bit. That's something Hitomi does very well. And because of this, now Kanzuki Dynasty, the Helena here, has to worry about what direction to do her hold, and therefore it makes it a little more inconsistent and makes her hesitate a little bit more in terms of, do I need to block up or down?
So this is actually a good example of something you can do. She has learned my rock, scissors, what have you, and is beating me almost every time. So part of the reason of why this is happening is that I've been hitting too many buttons, or I'm trying to use a particular hold. But if I just block that, I probably get to punish or do something else afterwards. Unless I'm facing backwards. So really you just end up cycling through and figuring out one more thing and one more thing that will confuse your opponent or trick them or bait them out. And over time you get to build up your fighting game knowledge through this, your DOA knowledge and your character knowledge, and overall you're really still having fun the whole time because the game is basically always at your level, as long as you have someone who can play basically with you. So, at the very beginning, one of the things that's useful about DOA, and why it's so great that the Core Fighters is in fact free, is that it has a bunch of tools to help you learn the basic idea of fighting games, and how to get started into DOA and go from there. Anyway, we are going to go and poke at some of the training stuff and just show you a little bit about what you might experience when you come into this game in the first place and get started. And so they have various stuff. There's obviously a training mode room where you can just, your standard fighting game training mode, you can do whatever you want, set up the computer to do things, and practice anything. There's this command training, which will take you through your character's moves and combos and such, and once you've gotten the most basic feel for it, or you've gotten frustrated, just give you a nice easy way to pick up one or two more things. And while your character may have like 50 different things they can do in terms of strings or combos, you only really need to pick up one or two at a time most of the time, and slowly build up your knowledge. There's a similar thing here, but for the moment we're going to go and look at the tutorial. And DOA has a great tutorial that takes you up through a large number of things and various levels, starting from even the most basic in terms of movement, buttons and such. So if you want to get started for the first time in something, not every game has this. Some are good, some are bad, some don't even exist. DOA has a very nice one. Obviously, basic movement is something that's different. But even as a veteran coming in from another game, you can still learn something occasionally by going through one of these. For instance, in Street Fighter, Guilty Gear, Dragon Ball FighterZ, everything else I'm used to, holding down back will stop your movement. Here, it lets you retreat just a little bit, as we were seeing before.
And if anything, like any of the terms we used during this stream confused you a little bit, such as like holds, the tutorial you can just like look through. It's sort of like a physical, technical glossary of stuff. And it's free.
And so I can go through the movement tutorial, I can go through the buttons tutorial. But in addition to that, they'll teach you about highs and lows, they'll teach you about combos and chains and such. They'll teach you how to guard things, basically blocking, the variations of blocking. They'll teach you about throws, basically stepping through the Jonkin. Strike beats throw beats hold beats strike, etc. And then they can start to put it all together and slowly work their way up into higher level content that, well, it goes, as you see, quite far down, just in terms of how I'm scrolling through. But they'll teach you all sorts of stuff about stages, advanced, starting to teach you concepts about risk and reward, special hits, more difficult versions of things that are going on. Basically, plenty of new stuff that will help you get into the game and work your way up as you go through. Maybe do a couple of these, go play against the computer, play with your friend a little bit, and then do a couple more. And each time you go through, as long as you have like the basic mindsets that, in terms of how to think about a fighting game, you can get quite good just off of this sort of thing.
And as you probably noticed throughout Kanzaki Dynasty, scrolling through the list of available lessons, there's also tests that sort of bring together all of the lessons. And basically, if you're unsure that you understand the concept or a group of concepts, which they do a very good job of slowly building on, just take a test and go, oh, no, I apparently didn't understand the way high strikes work or how holds are supposed to work. Also, I think this is like a way you can test Hitomi for free, because I'm pretty sure Hitomi is the training partner type character for DOA and most iterations.
And so it teaches you stuff like how certain higher moves will whip crouchers, and all of the little details of the game bit by bit to work your way up. which is really nice to have in a fighting game, especially when you're just starting out. I think I started on Street Fighter 4 personally, and I don't recall it having a whole lot of this sort of tutorial thing. Maybe I was silly and didn't go and find it, but I don't think it was actually even there.
No.
And so having something like this in not only quite a good fighting game, but a free fighting game that you can try out easily at will and get started, even if you find out it's not your thing, well, it was free. Really helps a lot in terms of being able to try things out, and it's
a
would've been
$60
helpful.
game.
Yeah. It's a $60 game that
With a lot of thinking
with a little
behind
patience.
it.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously still stuff that is really helpful to know in terms of thinking about it. So, like with the Jonkin we were talking about earlier, and convincing your opponent that throwing rock more often, to put out a metaphor, and suddenly switching to using scissors more. If you can think about that, if you can think about your opponent is the person you're facing, not necessarily the character or whatever, those are just mediums for fighting someone else. If you can think about it that way, you can probably pick up the rest of the lessons in here and apply them to your fighting. And apply them to the way you play the game. One of the things I like about DOA's training mode is it has basically a guide well, we'll go into the combo challenge. And I'll go with Hayate since everyone will have access to it. A lot of fighting games, when they do a tutorial of like inputs and stuff, they'll only tend to focus on very specific chains. Oh, this is the wrong mode. Hold on a sec. Command training. That must be what it was. There we are. They'll try to teach you very specific things. But first of all, you can go through every single possible string of moves, more or less. There's some custom combo stuff that they obviously can't really demonstrate, but you get a fairly decent idea of, okay, so I'm in this position. What can I do after this kick? And it will change if you did something that can go into something else.
Yes, one of the things about DOA that this command training is very useful for is that when you press a direction button, something happens, But from there, you now have a slightly different set of options, basically follow-ups you can do from that your moves might be a little different, or you might be able to do certain things. And this will help you get through those, basically step you up level by level for your character. Giving you, rather than, alright, here's training mode, you got your buttons, right? Good luck, figure out the combos, okay? That you might experience in some other games. Or, alright, here's some advanced combo challenges. Good luck! That you can get in maybe Street Fighter or other such. You can get sort of a walking yourself through it and heading up the levels very nice and smoothly from this. So, for instance, up punch, forward punch, and forward. You have to hold the forward punch, the second forward punch, it looks like. Let's see if I can do it.
I was just messing around, showing the different menus that come up on the input screen.
I see. Where it basically is keeping track of your options for you.
Exactly. So my point was more so, there are some games, mostly anime-style games, that will take you through basically every type of combo and moveset you can do, but I have really only found DOA and sometimes Mortal Kombat does a weird thing too, if I recall correctly. It was either that or Tekken, I can't remember which one. But that has this style of menu where it'll show you the flow of strikes and what they mean, what the different flows mean. And that is why I really feel like DOA is one of the better games in terms of teaching players, if you're in this position after this move, you can do something different. It allows you to do something different because your opponent is now in this space, or should be in this space, relatively speaking, and you are here, so you can do this cool kick or this different punch. And in 2D fighting games, that sort of thing can still happen. Meaties are a type of example of this. You use this move, for example, a sweep, and you've knocked them down in the sweep. Now you can go and dash and hit a punch, or dash and then throw, depending on your character and the options. But DOA has a very good way of teaching you flows and the meaning of different buttons and timings. So that's part of why I like DOA Core Fighters, in terms of teaching players that if you do a move, it changes things, both in you and your opponent, in a very obvious and rewarding way. And because of the way their command training is set up, you have a very easy way of going through all of your character's options and learning all of the different places and feelings, even without having a friend to help you figure all that stuff out. It's still good to have that, don't get me wrong, but it's very nice to give you a leg up, especially if you don't have a friend nearby you to play Core Fighters with you or online. Anyway, I think it is time to wrap things up a little bit. So we're starting to wind down now. So again, this week's characters in rotation for DOA core fighters are Rachel and Leon.
And that is on top of Ryu, Ayane, Kasumi, and Hayate, I believe, that are always available.
So it's a really good roster for learning the game, I feel, and getting a good peek at all of the different character types. It's free on PlayStation and I think Xbox as well, Xbox One. So pick it up. It doesn't cost you much except memory space.
Mm-hmm.
And not very much memory space at that. Hopefully we gave you some ideas of how to approach using DOA for learning fighting games and learning the very basics of Dead or Alive. We will be streaming our normal Street Fighter content on Monday, Wednesday, Friday next week, as well as having our lounges for Street Fighter on Monday, Guilty Gear on Tuesday, and Dragon Ball Fighters on Thursday. We probably will not be releasing any new bot or kata this weekend, though we do have 3 katas and 1 bot in the works currently, some of which we've already previewed, but they're still undergoing testing. The 3rd season of Street Fighter has given us a lot to work with, but we've covered a lot of the basics already, so we're making sure that we're giving stuff that can add something new to our training tools, which you can find at 2-mk.org. So if you want any alerts of our new bots and katas or our streams, check us out at Twitter at 2_mk_FGC. Hopefully you get some time this weekend to try out Core Fighters. It's a really great game, and it's free.
And if there's anyone you know that's interested in getting into fighting games in the first place that isn't necessarily quite sure, tell them to grab DOA, Core Fighters free download online, and try it out. And pick it up yourself and see what it's like, and give them someone to play with and help get along.
Mash some buttons. So this is Just Fine
And Kanzuki Dynasty
with 2MK, and we bid you good night and have a good weekend. So take care.